Não é tempo técnico, mas é intervalo aqui no podcast. Já imaginou se seu time tivesse um seguro para não perder nunca? Pois é, isso não existe. Mas com a Zurich Seguros, quem não perde nunca é você. Na Zurich Seguros, os planos se adequam às suas necessidades em qualquer momento da sua vida. Seja seguro de auto, residência, vida e muito mais. Diferente de alguns times, na Zurich Seguros você pode confiar. Para saber mais, acesse zurich.com.br ou consulte seu corretor.
Sair da escola já com uma formação profissional no currículo? Parece bom demais pra ser verdade, né? Pois é. No ensino técnico do Senac, isso é possível. É ensino médio junto com formação técnica, que acontece durante os 3 anos. Lá, eles usam metodologia para projetos, desenvolvendo competências como resolução de problemas, pensamento crítico e colaboração, além de valores éticos e sustentáveis. Quer saber? Senac. Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino médio e saiba mais.
The Athletic.
Somebody might have once told you that satellite riders can't win MotoGP World Championships. However, that person is sat here in the Barcelona press room wearing a Satellite Riders Can Win Championships t-shirt because Jorge Martin is the world champion. Simon Patterson was wrong. We're going to spend quite a lot of the Race MotoGP podcast today talking about that, along with me, Matt Beer, Val Harunchi, who's also in Barcelona with Simon, and Megan White. Val also, I thought Val was going to chuck the t-shirt on as well because he did a pre-pod recording costume change, but he was just getting into a Chelsea shirt for the occasion. And Megan's dressed in the warmest jumper I've ever seen anyone wear because even though she lives in Scotland, she's refusing to turn the heating on. But back to Satellite Riders and Championships. Regular listeners, you will know that Simon has for a very long time said that a Satellite Rider could never win a championship. And in the Race Members Club's questions for this episode, most of them, I think, Idiriam, Paul McClanahan, Gordon, Eric Yip, Dan Neal, Jasper Pendlebury, and Oscar Robledo all sent basically piss-taking messages to Simon about the fact that Jorge Martin has clinched the title. So I think our first topic has to be, in all seriousness, how was this actually possible, given that it hasn't been done before? And then apart from, until Martin came along, it never looked like it was going to be done before in any realistic sense. Simon?
So I held my hands up. I asked Jorge Martin this question in the press conference afterwards. I admitted that I had said he wasn't going to do it and that he went and proved me wrong. And the last thing I expected him to do was to kind of agree with me, but that's basically what he did. Because I asked him what made Pramac special, what helped them win the championship, and he said, no, it was the fact that Ducati was 100% full commitment behind him from start to finish. That we know that Pramac has the latest spec machinery, that they start the season on a level playing field, but he insisted it was the fact that they finished the season on a level playing field that basically took him here, that Ducati were super upfront with him, gave him everything he needed, didn't play silly games, didn't play team orders, didn't push a magic button that made his bike explode halfway through the race on Sunday that would have handed the championship to race winner Pecco Bagnaia. They were just treated them like teammates and didn't change that after Martin announced in a bit of a rage that he was off to Aprilia next year. So, I guess fair play to Ducati because they put a factory bike into a satellite team and then just let them to it. And that was enough to make the difference.
Val, all the time we've been saying that Ducati would definitely make sure Martin couldn't win the championship if he was off to Aprilia. You've maintained that Ducati desperately wants to be seen to be winning fairly and playing fair. So you're pretty vindicated at this point. But it must sting a little bit, surely, for Ducati, despite the smiles today, that the rider they're letting go is the one that's won this championship.
100%, but you can't win them all, and they won part of this. It'll go down in the history books as a Ducati rider winning the title next to the Ducati factory team winning the team's title, and Ducati winning the manufacturer's title by almost 400 points. Ultimately, the way the Martin-Ducati bridge seems to have mended this weekend compared to previously in terms of the rhetoric from one side to another, it almost, there's a small part of me that made it feel like a soft launch of a 2027 reunion.
Oh, wow.
Or a reunion down the line at some point. Yeah, that's already, I shouldn't go as far as to say, obviously he's not going to win anything on the Aprilia. Look at them. Like, look at them today, look at them all the second half of the season. I shouldn't say that, even though maybe like 30% of me feels that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels like all the ill feeling, all the hurt, all the sort of told you so's, the way Martin felt snubbed and felt like a fool, a championship cures a lot of that. And for Ducati, you know, you lose this year, but you show all the prospective potential future riders, all of your current riders, sign with Ducati. Join a Ducati. Ducati will treat you okay.
What Val has just said about Jorge Martin potentially coming back to Ducati reminds me of something we've said before in this podcast. And essentially what it means is that whenever Honda develop the RC214 into a championship-winning bike in 2027, and Marc Marquez goes back there, there's going to be a space for him space for Martin at Factory Ducati team. Perfect. Win-win.
We had loads of questions about 2025, and I put them all to a separate section for us to get into on Tuesday, thinking this would be about the season finale. And we're, 5 minutes in, and you two have gone to 2027, which is epic. I appreciate that. We'll do a 2027 podcast at some point before next year. Megan, on your podcast appearances, I don't think you've actually been here at the right times to commit one way or the other, but until like halfway through this season, was your perspective that satellite riders were hopelessly outgunned in title fights, or did you think this sort of thing was possible?
Eagle-eared listeners will at some point out that I did, in fact, commit to satellite riders can't win championships. And I think that in 10 years' time, this will still be the only time that they have. I think that the thing that Val was saying about Ducati, like ultimately Ducati did still win. Like, yeah, oh look, you know, we let them win, but we still won really. And also, who's the winner going forward with Marc Marquez on the factory team? Still Ducati. So whichever way you look at this, Ducati has won in every sense of the word. Jorge Martin going to Aprilia, kind of a bummer. Getting Marc Marquez instead, big win. So I think the real winner here today is Ducati in every sense. But yes, I did agree with Simon, so I will hold my hands up. I was wrong. My prediction for the weekend was wrong. I was wrong. Yeah. So, yeah.
When we outlined our scenarios for this weekend last week, 3 of us were fairly spectacularly wrong in everything we said, and Val was pretty much spot on this year. So, and that was another episode of Val was right, which keeps happening.
And I was
this year.
And I was compared to Andrea Iannone. So,
is it what you've both said about Ducati being able to take the credit? Still, I did notice the Ducati Corsi tweet fairly soon after the finish basically read, "Well done, Jorge. Look, everyone, he wasn't a Ducati. This was a Ducati. Ducatis are good." And it's like, yeah, okay. The smart play here is to just embrace this and go, yeah, that's our machinery doing the winning. We'll celebrate. We'll celebrate that. Dan Neal in the Race Members Club has asked a lot of questions as usual. What I'm going to pick for this episode, though, is will we ever see a satellite bike win a championship again? Now, on this subject, I've mentioned Simon's T-shirt, which is part of the Race's merchandise range. If you want to get a Satellite Riders Can Win Championships T-shirt, go to shop-the-race.com, go to the statements. So go to collections, and it's the statements T-shirts that you want. I imagine sales for the alternative T-shirt saying Satellite Riders can't win championships will now go down a bit. They were lagging behind can win anyway. I would say that you could still buy a can't win championships one. For instance, Val, you could buy one and just edit it with a bit of paint saying Satellite Riders can't win championships again because Pramac's gone to Yamaha and they're not good. So that'd be a Val special. Or we could go Satellite Riders can't win championships again because Marquez broke Ducati and everyone left. So those are options. But as Dan put it, will we see a satellite bike win a championship again? Who wants to come in first in this one? Is this feeling like a one-off scenario from the way Pramac was set up, from how poor relative to every other manufacturer was? Or is this actually the start of a trend? Val, you can jump first.
Yeah, I don't see why this would be a one-off necessarily, which is not to say that it's definitely going to happen in the coming years, or in the next decade, or in the next 50 years, or whatever. You know, it's never easy to win any single championship. I mean, Martin really had to drag this one over the line this weekend. It wasn't easy. Not like he exactly dominated the season, did he? But you look at the rest of the standings right now, because it's not just Martin who beat factory bikes, right? Pedro Acosta was basically one corner away from finishing ahead of the Works KTMs, and the Works Repsol Hondas both finished behind the 2 LCR bikes. Now, you know, there are explanations, individual explanations to all of those cases, but the truth of the matter is this is not the MotoGP it once was. The truth of the matter is the satellite teams are not only more professional than they used to be, but they get so much better equipment because all of MotoGP has collectively realized that the closer your roster of bikes is, if you have 8 Ducatis that are similar-ish, if you have 4 KTMs that are the same bike or whatever, that's good in weekend, especially good in a weekend where practice time is more limited than it used to be because we've moved to a sprint format. Many a rider has mentioned Ducati's number advantage as a major factor in its dominance, but it's only a numbers advantage in the sense that the bikes are close enough to be similar to learn from one another. And to do that, you have to give your satellite teams the best chance you can provide them, 95%, 90%, maybe even 100%. That's a scenario in which a satellite team could, again, do something like this.
I disagree. I think that this year was a bit of a... No surprises. I think this year is a bit of a one-off where the planets aligned. But for me, the number one factor in this year that has allowed a satellite team to win a championship is we're picking up satellite teams, but let's be honest, the thing that won the championship this year was Jorge Martin. It was an incredibly talented racer. And incredibly talented racers don't end up in satellite teams for very long. And that's kind of, when he did elaborate a little bit whenever I asked him, and he wasn't praising Ducati about the team, he said that the strength of the team was that he'd been there for 4 years. And every other team he'd been in, he'd only been there for 2. And he shouldn't have been in Pramac for 4 years. It was just because of this weird situation with Enea Bastianini and him getting, potentially, if Enea Bastianini hadn't been injured at the start of 2022, Martin might have made it into the factory team last year and won the championship in factory colours. But Ducati felt a bit sorry for Bastianini, didn't want to bump him mid-contract, mid-deal. There was a lot of weird factors that put Martin into a satellite team when I think most people would agree after his first 2 years with Pramac, he didn't really deserve to be in one. And I can't see that happening again going forwards, especially as the other factories start to improve again and start to become more valid options for people like him. I mean, he's already leaving to go to a weaker bike because he wants to be a factory rider. And I think that, as Yamaha, as Honda improve, as there's suddenly 10 or 12 factory bikes to choose from in the grid again, people are going to are going to spend less time. Really, really talented people are going to spend less time in satellite colours.
I think this is completely true. I think you're completely 100% right. What I would counter that with is, so every top rider has a shelf life as a satellite rider, as you've said, right? Like at a certain point, when you've achieved enough in MotoGP, even if it's not quite a title, not even close to a title, you will not accept a satellite rider contract. And that's true. We've seen that with Martin just now. We've also seen that with many other riders. The prestige of the factory colors, not even maybe the increased salary or whatever, or the travel or whatever. The feeling that somebody has pointed to you and said, "No, you're our factory representative because we think you're one of the 2 best guys that we have." Every MotoGP rider craves that massively, and there is only a limited amount of time at the start of a MotoGP rider's career where they will accept missing out on that while being one of the best. But new riders come in all the time, and we don't even know who's like our future alien superstar is, who's maybe right around the corner or whatever.
Yes, we do. It's David Alonso.
None of us know what David Alonso will do in MotoGP. But let's say, and again, don't remember this as an exact example because we don't know. We really do not know, and it's not an expectation I'm placing on him in any way. This could be any other name. This could be, I don't know, Max Espargaro, whatever, Alecia's son. I don't know. I mean, I'm just naming names. But the next guy that comes in, people will come in on 2-year deals, rookie riders on 2-year deals, and there could be a rookie rider who comes in on a 2-year deal that marries into a satellite team for 2 years, and boom, he adapts the first year and he wins the championship the second year. I don't see why not. I don't see why that can't happen with how strong satellite teams, how competitive satellite teams have gotten.
Yeah, I do see the argument that the way factories are treating their satellites, like KTM has got a very strong lineup across its 4 bikes, but also KTM very quickly went, Pedro Acosta, you're clearly sensational, get on the factory bike. There was no way it was going to keep him at Tech 3 for that extra year. I don't think you mentioned the Bastianini circumstance. There's actually quite a few bits of kind of bad luck and strange chess that have kept Martin at Pramac for that long, because there's a scenario where if he doesn't get injured as early as he did in his rookie season, he keeps impressing at the rate he was in Qatar that year. And whether it's Ducati going, we need to change plan quickly for 22, or someone else swooping in with a bag of money or whatever, he's out of Pramac within a year, rather than having that slightly inconclusive season with the injury in the middle that was really pretty savage, and then still winning. But yeah, it wasn't the season it would have been if he hadn't smashed himself up at Portimao in his first year. Hell on Wheels in the Members Club said Martin was so much more composed this year, but did this approach win it for him, or did Pecco's mistakes hand it to him, given that Pecco lost by only 10 points in the end? Megan, in the verdict column that we've run on the race website, you're pretty flat out in saying that Pecco had far too many DNFs, far too many mistakes to be champion, effectively. Would you go as far as saying this is Pecco handing it to Martin, or is it not quite that stark?
I don't think handing it to him, but I do think that his mistakes lost him the championship as much as Martin won the championship. Like, Martin was brilliant on Saturdays. Martin was brilliant on many Sundays. Martin did an amazing job. He was more consistent. He finished second loads of times. Like, Martin did an incredible job, and I don't want what I'm saying to take away from that. But Pecco, coming into the season, was the favourite. I said, Pecco was going to win the championship, another point on which I was wrong. But I just think that Pecco had 8 DNFs, and you can say, this wasn't his fault, and this wasn't his fault, and if the wind had been in a different direction this time, that wouldn't have been his fault, and if his horoscope had read slightly differently. He DNF'd 8 times, whatever colour you paint it, and I just think, that is not what you do to win a championship. If you look at, the years in which Mark has won the championship, and he'll have had, 1 DNF and, won basically every other race and then finished second a handful of times. It's that's how you win a championship. I just don't think that 8 DNFs is, wow, well done, So it's a shame, but ultimately, that many mistakes, because if he had won the championship and then you go, well done champion, 8 DNFs, that looks bad. So yeah, Pecco can learn from those mistakes, and I think he's already said, these are the things that I can do differently. Maybe I need to do what Martin said and settle for 4th, 5th sometimes instead of pushing and crashing. So it sounds like he's already got that, but he should have got that before.
The one thing I'll add to that, Megan, is that I think that last year's Jorge Martin would have crashed as much as Bagnaia, and maybe that's where the difference is coming from. He is a cooler character this year. He's more mature, he's more sensible, he's more sane, and I think that he would have been racking up the mistakes just as much as Bagnaia was last year, as was this year. But he didn't. He was better than him, and in that regard, more than anything else, he was better than him in that regard, because arguably he wasn't as fast as him. He didn't win anywhere near as many races as him, but he was more sensible, which is not something I would have ever said about Jorge Martin 12 months ago.
Yeah, and this was the thing, Pecco after the race saying, Martin did that and I didn't, Martin had learned that. Why have you not learned that by now? Surely, that's common sense. So I don't know, I think, Pecco had an incredible season. He won loads of races. He put in some great performances. He, this weekend, he won both races. He's an incredible rider. But Jorge Martin was more consistent. And consistency, though often not super exciting, consistency wins championships. The F3 champion this year didn't win a single race, but he was the champion. So
no, I disagree completely with both Megan and Simon. And I genuinely could not agree less, I think. I don't think Bagnaia was meaningfully worse than Martin, meaningfully weaker than Martin this whole season. I think if you flip one result, the Le Mans technical DNF in the sprint, which Martin never had. You flip one result, you have a different champion. Ultimately, when there's so many races, it all comes down to that small stuff. 8 DNFs is a lot. Yeah, it sounds like a lot, and I think it is a bit on the high side, certainly, very much so. But also, 2018 Mark, right? So 2018 Mark had 4 non-scores in 18 starts. That's a higher rate, isn't it? You can do it.
Is it?
Ultimately,
I don't think that is a high. No, it's not
is.
Far behind. But I
can't do maths.
No, 4 in 18 and 8 in 40. 8 in 40 is fewer as a rate than 4 in 18. I mean, it's really close, but it's fewer. But look, mechanicals happen, crashes happen. A lot of crashes are going to happen over a 40 race season, and ultimately, if you're retiring that much and you have just the one rival who's up there all the time, yeah, you're going to lose. and it will be like a deserved defeat, I guess, but also not really. I mean, I don't agree with the perception that there was a lesson here that Bagnaia didn't learn necessarily. I don't agree with the perception that it was an open goal and he missed it. The other thing with a two-rider championship is you have to push quite a bit because the other guy's always going to be up there. You have to you can't really afford days off because you don't know. He cannot know that Jorge Martin will pit on a dry track for wet tires. You can't know that. That's 25 points there. You can't know that Jorge Martin is going to crash out of the lead at the Sachsenring. You can't know that Jorge Martin will crash out of the lead at Jerez. It's easy to say in hindsight, and maybe I felt during much of the season that way, that, you know, if only one of these two guys was smart enough to points race, and, you know, yes, yes, they win. They probably win. But I don't know that they can do that in the moment. I don't know that in every single day and every single decision you can take that decision. I mean, they were putting each other under pressure, and sometimes they buckled, but it's also a question of the lesson that you guys want them to learn. What is it? Because they push or they crash. What is the lesson? Is the lesson slowed down by 3 seconds every race? Because that's going to cost you a lot more points. How much do they slow down? How much do they speed up? What's the lesson?
Well, I mean, Pecco said that it's about, you know, finishing fourth, finishing fifth. You know, I'm a rider that never gives up, so sometimes it's better to think more and maybe finish in fifth or fourth than crash. This is something that I will learn. That's what he said. So I'm not the MotoGP rider here. I agree. I agree with a lot of what Val said. So I don't think we couldn't agree less, because I do agree with a lot of what Val also said. I think that ultimately they both had brilliant seasons. They both won tons of races. There are so many races as well, different argument, but there are so many races that for either of them for it to be that close at the end as well, like, just pays testament to how strong they both were. As Val said, the technical in Le Mans, and it's a different story, you know, the not being wiped out by Marc Marquez or any of the other incidents, you know, all of those kind of, it's really, really marginal. And I think they both had an incredible season. They both did an amazing job. And I think that is the lesson, rather than, oh, well, maybe Pecco shouldn't crash. Like, that's not the point.
One thing I will add is that it's been a long time since I felt as bad or as sorry for the loser of a championship as I did for, like, 18-time race winner Pecco Bagnaia this season. Like, holy hell. Yeah, I mean, that guy did not deserve to lose a championship this season. He did in the end, but, like, wow.
For me, it was kind of the opposite, insofar as I was nervous watching the Grand Prix today, because by that point, I really wanted Jorge Martin to win it. And the biggest reason I wanted Jorge Martin to win it was because right the way through the season, these two have made their mistakes, and plenty of them. And, yeah, you know, we've mentioned that a few times. We've also, as the season's gone on, given them a lot more credit for going, actually, they're having to push so hard. They're having to race so many times. You know, these mistakes are going to happen when you're pushing that hard over 40 races, not 20. And I just thought, if it comes down to a really close finale and one of them crashes, the agony of that is going to be huge. I almost didn't want that for either of them, because I felt so invested in what they both put into this season in this particular battle. So the sort of slow burn defeat Pecco had in the end, where, like, he knew from kind of Sepang Saturday onwards this was probably done, but it wasn't over then. I thought he's had time to come to terms with this a little bit. Whereas if Jorge Martin loses it at Barcelona, the only way he loses it is because he screws up massively, or there's an unjust bit of taking out, or a heartbreaking technical failure. For him to lose it at the finale would have been a proper, you are on the cusp of making history as the first independent to win the title in the MotoGP era, and you've had it taken away from you, or you've blown it, and that would have been properly ouch. So I was biased today. I was properly nervous for him.
I was too, massively, but I'll get to that in a second. Firstly, man, I really should not have said I couldn't agree more. It's me getting into pundit brain, because I realize I'm 100%. I said this, like, the same things you guys have been saying. I said it like 3 months ago, and now I'm just arguing with people because it's other people, not me saying it. So I don't feel so good about that.
We're all friends here, Val.
Basically, let's stop having an argument over how much we actually agree with each other, because that's just wasting podcast time.
Look, you're not supposed to be biased, and ultimately, you know, in what I write, etc., and what I, the personal sentiment doesn't come into it unless the column calls for it in some way or the analysis calls for it. And you've heard me just now sort of make the argument for why actually Bagnaia should have been champion, right? But I really did not want to see Martin lose it today. I really, I'm very much sort of the same reason as you, Matt. I felt a 1-to-1 split over these 2 seasons. Very fair.
Yeah.
I felt he has done enough for this to be like a lifetime achievement award sort of thing. Like, you've done enough to be MotoGP champion at this point. You deserve it. And if he had blown it, it would have been horrifying. It would have been it would have been a very difficult podcast to do, because you don't want to see people go through that kind of sporting. Pecco will be fine. He's won 2 already. I'm not sure he's done enough to win 3 in a row, honestly. I'm not convinced. This is sort of sportingly, I like this outcome, and I didn't want to see him drop it down the road, even though this is bad to say, but I didn't want that outcome.
I often talk about how I want the drama and the storylines, not really the sport, because I'm all about the listenership, the clicks, and the video views. On this occasion, I kind of didn't mind. It was a bit dull. We didn't see Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin actually go wheel to wheel much in the decider, a little bit at the start of the sprint, but we did have a few wingmen and helpers get involved. Enea Bastianini made Jorge Martin's life pretty difficult by beating him to second after a long battle in the sprint. But in the Grand Prix, Bastianini came up against a sort of unofficial teammate for Jorge Martin, and Aleix Espargaro, who went into the weekend going, Jorge Martin is my best mate here, and he is coming to my team, Aprilia. I want him to bring number 1. I'm going to help him. Eric Yip in the members club said Aleix is the best wingman. He did more in one race for Martin than his actual teammate Franco Morbidelli did in the whole year. And that's probably the only mention Morbidelli's getting today. Val, you asked basically everybody involved in this dice about what happened, because Bastianini did not enjoy racing Espargaro and had some pretty blunt things to say about their battle in Martin's wake during the Grand Prix.
Yeah, just a little bit of how the sausage is made, I guess. So, Enea comes in and he's always smiling, basically, right? And there's always a fairly monotone sort of answer coming from him. It's always like vaguely positive without being exuberant to everything. And he came in that way today, even though having lost, the third place battle. And I was like, I guess nothing really angered him. So his media session with the English media, it's mostly complete. And in the very end, I'm like, all right, I'll ask about the Aleix thing. Maybe he minded it. And it turns out he extremely minded it. Yeah, and he's continuing to smile. He still said, no, that wasn't on. That's not how the racing should be. Aleix immediately had a snappy comeback that, I beat you, didn't I? Was waiting for you on the final lap. You were on a better bike. Where were you? And Alex Marquez also very much took Aleix's side, and then he was a witness to the battle. It's good that I can recap what they said about it, because I have no idea how I feel about it. I don't know, man.
Effectively, though, the way Espargaro described it, he strongly refuted any suggestion that he was trying to hold people up. So for listeners, if you haven't seen this bit of the race yet, or just as a reminder, Martin was third coming out of the first corner, and he had Bastianini and Espargaro behind him in fourth and fifth, and Espargaro made it his business to properly get going with Bastianini. Long dice, lots of wheel-to-wheel stuff, let Martin build a bit of a gap, and then eventually Bastianini goes off the road at the first corner for a bit, drops out of that fight. Espargaro described it as like riding more over the limit than he had been all season, pointing out he was the only person in among the Ducatis on not a Ducati. And I would certainly agree that he wasn't exactly holding back, given that he beat Maverick Vinales, his teammate on the same bike, by 17 seconds and 10 places in that race. So I don't think he was exactly kind of in reverse gear holding off Martin's rivals. But was it inappropriate for him to go into this race with the stance of, I'm going to help this guy who's not even my teammate? Simon?
So, first of all, so Val and I are both sitting in the media centre in Barcelona right now, and on the screens behind us, they're showing today's race, and there's 3 laps to go. And I specifically remember watching it live at this point with Val, and we were discussing how Aleix looked like someone that was riding their heart out on a bike that wasn't quick enough to keep the guys behind him. And I think that's essentially part of this, is that the Aprilia is not as good as the Ducatis, and he was struggling to hold them back. So that is part of it. The other part of it, he was pretty upfront and honest about. He said that he'd made a plan with Jorge Martin before the race, that he was going to do what he could do, because Martin is, to use the words that he's used many times before to describe him, his little brother. He wanted him to win the championship. He wanted Aprilia to win, or to be able to take the number 1 plate next year to Aprilia, to his bike. And I think that Aleix, I think he didn't do anything that he wouldn't have done, right? Because he was fighting for position, and a good position, in his last ever race. So there is nothing that he did today that he wouldn't have done in any other circumstance, except that I think today, because it was his last race and because it was Martin fighting for the championship, he was a little bit more fired up. He was a little bit more motivated. He was riding angry, or riding focused, to put it the way he put it. And I think that's what we saw. I don't think there was any great massive conspiracy. If you wanted to start a great massive conspiracy, there's probably some sort of a 2015 comparison to the way that Marc Marquez sat behind the Spanish guy, or the guy in front, instead of making any mad passes on Bagnaia. But again, I don't think that's the case either. I think everybody today was at the limit of where they felt comfortable.
Yeah, I should say, I don't think, definitely, like, in the way Aleix ran his race, like, I can have no objections. And I think if Enea thinks about it, if he rewatches it, if he looks at the lap times, he really should go, fair enough, because Barcelona is also, a tire preservation race. You don't go full tilt from the start to the finish. That's not what you do to make the finish in Barcelona. And for Aleix, knowing where the Aprilia is right now, the value in trying to force his way past Martin, if it came to that, to his ultimate race outcome, for me is, it might not be the best way for his race to play out. I think his race outcome was probably the best that was on offer for him and Aprilia here today. I can't object to that. It's more the question of, we are having sort of these grid alliances come out in the open, being very openly talked about. I'm glad that we didn't see tested today what would happen if Aleix was much quicker than Martin and needed to decide whether to overtake him or not, whether to cause him any trouble or not. And at the same time, the other good thing is Pecco also has allies on the grid, doesn't he? As we mentioned before, it's very clearly so. You can figure out who they are. They have something in common. I'll let you guess what that is. So it's on the balance of things, it's all right. It's fine.
Yeah, I did. It's tricky. Overall, motorcycle racers, racing drivers are humans. Humans like some people more than they like some other people.
Yeah.
And it's not always to do with who is your work colleague, who is your teammate. Yeah. It's you can't. Quite a few times on Bring Back V10s, our Retro F1 series, we talk about situations where kind of past grudges come out between F1 drivers in terms of who's holding who up when being lapped in a title decider when they're past their best and no longer in that fight. It's like, yeah, humans have feelings, basically, and you can't entirely remove that, even if maybe you should. But
such a good way to look at it. In fact, it's such a good way to look at it because you can also just be like, that's also part of the game. That's part of the racing package.
Yeah.
Finding allies, endearing yourself to people, and that pays you off on track, making game theory decisions as to whether you can, take something from somebody at one point or not take it and expect that debt to be repaid at some other point. That is part of why we love motorsport, isn't it? It's just sometimes it's easier to accept than other times. I hope for all our listeners and for everybody who is watching it, I hope it was basically fine. Also because honestly, this was a kick-ass Aleix ride. I nearly swore. Yeah. I did swear, I guess. This was such a good ride. So if we're gonna talk about it, instead of talking about it like I've just done for the past 10 minutes, let's just say, great job, fantastic farewell. Thank you for everything, mate.
This was the thing for me, is that Aleix put in a really good ride. That battle was really entertaining, and that's why it was shown so much, because it was really good. It was good fun. And when I then saw Bastianini complaining, I was like, what do you want? Like, you finished 7th and Aleix finished 5th, and there was someone in between you in the end because you made a mistake. So this is Aleix's fault because he was quick. You were on a factory Ducati and he was on an Aprilia, and I was really like, okay, sure, because Alex Marquez passed Aleix at the end, so it was like, I don't know. I just thought it was quite odd, given that it was Aleix's last race and it was such a fantastic ride, and now all the discussion has been about Bastianini. It's just like, yeah, I don't know.
And just to go back to Eric's initial question about Aleix doing more than for Martin than Martin's teammate has all season, it is 100% not the job of your teammate to help you. In fact, it's your job of your teammate to beat you at every possible opportunity, because that's the first person you have to beat. You get the special treatment that Martin and maybe Bagnaia from Marquez got today. You get that one day a year. And most riders don't even get it one day a year. They get it maybe, if they're lucky, one day in their entire career. And it's on the day where you can win a world championship. That's the only time that anyone else in the grid will do anything close to treating you with kid gloves. Because it's dog eat dog.
By that logic, Simon, if it wasn't Morbidelli's job to be Martin's wingman, it's his job to beat Martin. That went well as well, didn't it?
I mean, I'm not taking anything away from the fact that Frankie's still not there. But you know, such is life. That's a whole different subject for winter. But he's now got 3 mentions in this podcast, which is more than expected.
Yeah, true. I'm going to rattle through a few more questions about how the title was settled and a bit of what comes next from the Race Members Club. If you want to be part of that, throwing questions to us for these podcasts, go to Patreon and find the race on there, or go to the-race.com/members-club. We've got some Black Friday discounts coming up soon, so there's a very good time to get involved. Also, because we've got an absolute mountain of winter content heading your way, including exclusive interviews with 14-ish MotoGP riders. We've lost count. There's loads. It's going to be good. You'll get some of it in the main feed. You'll get all of it uncut exclusively for the Members Club, along with a few other special things, some of which I'm going to talk about later. But the next question for the Members Club is Todd Bryant. I like this one. This is mischievous. Todd says, do you guys feel that Pecco left cards on the table today? He seemed to make life as easy as possible for Martin. He possibly lacks the ruthless edge of your Rossis, Marquez's, Verstappens and Schumachers. So what Todd's saying here is should Pecco have deployed the Jorge Lorenzo Valencia 2013 tactic of kind of ride in reverse, holding everybody up to let people go for Martin? Bagnaia ruled that out really early on in this title fight, but was that a sign of weakness, or is that good? Foul?
Yeah, I mean, if he sleeps better at night with 2 titles and feeling that he's done the sportsmanlike thing instead of 3 titles, one of them won in the fashion that was being described, I mean, I think that's fine. It's hard to really to make up your mind on that, because the more I think about it, I've seen it happen in racing a bunch of times, you know, that sort of backing up your title rival into potential trouble, and it's legal, and I've never minded it, but at the same time, when you look at it logically, when you think about it, just, you know, for more than a second, I mean, you are basically trying to get him to crash, aren't you? Maybe go off, maybe, you know, get swallowed up, but ultimately what you're kind of hoping for, like a 40% outcome or a 50% outcome, if somebody tags them in the rear wheel and they go down. Yeah, I can see a very humanist objection to that sort of way of winning the title. I also think ruthlessness is overrated by motorsport commenters as an asset. Like it is an asset, but it's sometimes it's talked about as like the one thing. You know, I've heard it in many paddocks, and it's the way I've felt a lot of people talk about the all-time greats is, you know, what makes somebody an all-time great and somebody else not an all-time great, that somebody else is too nice, and the all-time great is very ruthless. I think that's a secondary thing, almost always, even a tertiary thing. The all-time great's fast. Then, you know, that other thing can give you a little bit of an edge. But first and foremost, you got to be fast. Bagnaia has won 2 titles without having to make enemies. 2 titles without having to do anything that compromised his vision of racing. I think that's good. You know what, I can't object to the way he's approached this weekend.
Here's the weird thing. I think that what he did today was the best way to put Martin under pressure. Ooh. I think that Jorge Martin is we've talked about this before, he's super aggressive, he's super good in a fight, and the times when he makes mistakes is whenever he's leading races and there's no one in front of him and he kind of loses his attention and falls off. And Pecco is the opposite. Pecco falls in battles, falls in groups a lot more. So actually by stretching it out the way that he did today, you know, that arguably put Martin in more danger. I think we talked about it maybe, Val, during the sprint more than during the Sunday race, but there was a point in the sprint where kind of everything settled down and Martin had no one in front of him for like a couple of seconds, and that's the point where I thought he was at highest risk of making a mistake, not whenever he was fighting. So I don't think that Pecco was trying that as a strategy. I think Pecco was just playing his all to win the race, and the result was what we saw. But yeah, I think that if you'd wanted to be smart, it's probably not going toe-to-toe with Jorge Martin in a group, because that's not where Martin falls off, that's where Pecco falls off.
Daniel Ingleton said, it was very lucky there was a danger of the championship on the line, because otherwise that was painful to watch in terms of meaningful track action. Lots of nodding and a bit of a giggle from Megan. Go on, Megan.
Apart from that Enea Aleix battle, and then obviously there was the little bit at the end with Alex Marquez, it was quite not exciting, that race, really. So I can see where he's coming from. I wouldn't say very painful. I would say not a classic.
Yeah, but they also didn't show some of the good stuff, and more understandably today than on the other days, maybe. There was, we had... So Brad Binder, I think, must have made an overtake on the final sector, maybe even the final corner. I still have no idea. But he made some sort of overtake on Enea Bastianini in the final sector that secured him a place in the championship over his teammate next year. Said teammate also being overtaken over the final on the final lap, and I would not be surprised at all if 85% of the listeners, maybe more, are hearing about these overtakes for the first time coming out of my mouth, which is not generally how you want to watch racing, right? You don't want me narrating it as an audiobook. You want to see it on your screen.
Well, it was noticed because Hayes and the members club said that all the accolades will rightfully go to Martin today, but at the same time, I'm pumped that Brad Binder got 5th in the championship and did it with such a great ride. So Hayes did notice Brad coming through from 18th on the grid to end up beating Acosta in the championship. Simon?
TV direction was woeful today. It was even worse than usual. They've been so on and off recently. There's been days it's been great, but this is one of these public service announcements that we do occasionally in the podcast. To the listeners, you're not going crazy. The heart rate spike that you had on lap 3 of the race was real. They did put up a graphic saying that Pecco Bagnaia had crashed. That happened. That actually happened during this race.
Somebody yelped in the media center when they saw it. I'm not naming any names, but it was a very loud yelp that then scared the person sitting next to them. Again, not naming any names.
You can't do stuff like that with a championship on the line. Who pushed that button? And are they being sacked? Did they sack them today, or are they doing it tomorrow? Because oh my God, yeah. So really, missing an overtake or two wasn't the worst thing that the TV department did today, was it?
It's always tricky when you're actually working during the race. That I do find that there's times I've realised I've watched 90% of it on the timing screen, or I've been making notes on something or planning the following week's content through the race. So my time watching a TV screen is probably less than most fans and viewers. But when they went to the Bastianini Aleix battle and the Aleix Alex Marquez stuff, you got the insets on the timing tower, basically showing the leaders, showing what Martin was doing. I don't think there was a time when maybe they hung around with the championship people too much in the coverage, but it was also a title decider, and that's why I can forgive the dull race a little bit as well, because it's the title decider. There's bigger stuff on the line here. There's you can understand in the championship deciding position, Martin will be more cautious than he might be otherwise. You can understand that with everything else that's going on, Marc Marquez is not going to shove it down the inside of Bagnaia 2 days before he walks into the Ducati Works garage saying, "Hi, I work here now. Hello, teammate." It's not going. It was going to be an edgy one, not a thrilling one. I'm not surprised.
You make a very good point, and perhaps I should calm down. It's not going to be like Abu Dhabi 2021 every time, but so yeah, maybe it's fair enough. Okay, it's not going to be thrilling, but it just did feel by halfway through, I was a bit like, oh my God, can we fast forward to the bit where the guy gets the ice and the Terminator and can we just do that bit now?
For our non-F1 knowledgeable listeners, Abu Dhabi 21 is F1's version of Sepang 15, which we were going to have to mention at some point in this episode.
That's been mentioned twice now.
Yeah. So Megan's benchmark for a good championship decider is controversy that takes over the world.
No,
basically.
sorry, not good. Just lots happening. Not good, bad. But things happened, and I nearly dropped a falafel wrap. There were no falafel wraps involved today, but I wouldn't have dropped them if there were.
Stuart Coulter to ask the first question that kind of moves us on from this weekend. We're going to do another podcast after the test on Tuesday. We're going to do a lot more podcasts in the winter. So lots of questions that you've all asked the Members Club about that kind of thing. We are going to include in those. But I'm going to throw a few in on this topic. Stuart Coulter says, will this be Jorge Martin's only Premier Class title? And as a disclaimer, I've got no doubt he's got the ability to win more, but will he get another opportunity to? Now, recently on a podcast, I mentioned that Ard suggested in a website headline that this was his only chance, which peeved Val because it was his column that I attached that headline to. So we quickly adjusted it to actually reflect Val's genuine opinion, not my bastardry that I put on it. But what do you three think? I still have, like I said at the time when we discussed this and that headline argument before, he's leaving a bike that can win titles for one that right now can't. You never know what's going to happen. Yes, he's clearly a phenomenal rider. You'd expect that teams in positions to win titles will be trying to get him onto their bikes in the future if Aprilia doesn't improve. You can't guarantee it. He's leaving a title-winning bike. People who leave title-winning teams often don't get that other chance. Am I just being too negative there?
No, I don't think you're being too negative. It's just I hate to say it categorically. And I think what Jorge Martin has shown both this season and last season, and also in 21, 22, of course, was the oddity with the engine. But, across 21, 23, 24, he's of this group that when given the right equipment should be going into every season eyeing the title. Maybe it won't be like a 40% shot, 50% shot like if it was this season. Maybe it'll be a 20% shot, 25% shot, 10% shot, 15% shot. Maybe with Pedro Acosta getting better and better, everybody else's chances will take a hit. Maybe with Fabio Quartararo, returning to where he belongs, everybody else's chances will take a hit. But Jorge Martin is also young enough to where, look, I do think this is his final title of this current regulation cycle. I do feel that way. It would be very cool if Aprilia proved me wrong, but that is it. I don't see how you can strongly feel otherwise based on what we've seen this season and based on everything that's going on around MotoGP.
Yeah.
But he's young enough to where this wasn't the last chance saloon, and it will also, I think, I'm the guy here who's always like, forget the mental factors, forget all that, forget all the learning, etc., forget all the rider development, blah, blah. It's all this, we're all dust in the wind, right? We're all specks in an uncaring universe, and everything is random chance, and that's how I go about things. But I think the fact he's won it this time will make the next time he goes for it so much easier. And that might help. Instead of turning 0 into 1, which is so hard, turning 1 into 2, I think if he gets the bike to do it, will be easier. I think he'll have every chance of doing it. Just maybe not 25, 26. Sorry.
On that topic, Goose highlights something Davide Tardozzi said in the TV interview on the grid. Goose's quote for Tardozzi is, if Aprilia wants to buy the number 1 plate, let's see if they can keep it next year. So Tardozzi's reacting to the possibility of the number 1 being on Aprilia, not a Ducati there, and being like, well, they've only got the number 1 because they grabbed the rider. They've got no chance of defending his title with him. Goose adds, given the result of the race and how the Ducati factory handled Jorge Martin from management side over the years, is that how you'd have wanted your last words on the subject to be quoted? Ducati essentially gave up the number 1 plate and put it up for auction. Wobbly head gesture from Simon, so he can come in first.
I think that this is standard issue. People taking a funny one-liner and turning it into something it's not. I think the whole thing is just Tardozzi being Tardozzi, and no one should remember this tomorrow because that's not the spirit in which it was intended. It's also worth noting that this, without dissing people too much, didn't come from journalists, came from a TV station.
But also it was pre-race, so he was saying it before the title was settled, so it is also like a little bit of mind games going on. I think another quote that he issued somewhere was that you'd have to shoot Martin for him not to finish in the top 3, and he needed top 9, which I found very, very funny. It's, it's chat.
This is what I was going to pick up on, is people are always like, drivers need to be ruthless and mean. And then when people make a throwaway comment like that, it's like, no, that's horrible. And it's like, which one is it? Like, it was clearly like a throwaway gesture. As Simon said, we don't, I haven't seen the clip of it being said. He could have been laughing while he said it. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But like, it's a throwaway remark. Just take it in the spirit that it was meant. Like, everyone loves to stir sometimes. Whatever people say, everybody loves to stir sometimes. So
the only thing I would say, and the only issue, and it's not a real issue. This is a joke. People should make more jokes, and people should, half-jokingly talk trash because it's fun. But the only issue I would take with Tardozzi's comment is, it's real easy to say after you've seen the Ducati and the Aprilia this season. Like, of course they won't keep it next year, probably. Their bike can't handle the heat. They'll finish 18th in Mandalika next season or whatever. I mean, I know that, you know that. So it's not really, you're not really throwing a challenge to them. They're in trouble right now.
Also, if you genuinely want really, really harsh comments, and to be remembered by it is definitely not going to be Tardozzi's today. It's going to be Alesia's. And I was waiting on you to fight for the podium in his final ever media debrief. Like, it wasn't even in the top 10 of bitchiest comments of the day.
I think we need more. True. I think we need more bitchy comments. I think MotoGP as a championship does not have enough bitchy comments. I'm a big NHL fan, and they are so bitchy.
I'm in.
Like, here, it's like whatever. They punch each other over there.
We're not advocating that.
I'm no sorry.
Although Aleix was also the last person to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not advocating like any punching, any like Verstappen Ocon altercations. I'm just saying, like, little trash talking here and there is good for everyone.
Vivek Thiram says, will having the current world champion on their bike, this is on the Aprilia topic, finally be key to Aprilia getting title sponsorship? It'd certainly be interesting to see the number one plate on an essentially blank bike next year. Simon, you've got a fairly close read on what goes on in Aprilia land. How are things looking for them commercially? Is the arrival of Martin going to make a difference?
I mean, you'd expect it to, because they've been fighting this battle for long enough, and I think that they've maybe just not found the right partner, because it's not just finding a title sponsor; it's finding a title sponsor that's going to give you enough value to warrant it. But you've got to think that suddenly Spanish companies that didn't really care too much about sponsoring Aleix are a bit more interested in being associated with the MotoGP number one plate, and Italian companies. You'd probably phone everyone who has a medium-sized sticker in Ducati's bike on Monday morning and just say, hey, do you guys want to talk? I'd be surprised if there's not a bit more money in the pot, yeah.
And finally in this section, Charles Medley, this is a lovely curiosity question, says, do the teams or the riders keep the championship winning bike? With Jorge Martin going to Aprilia and Pramac going to Yamaha, would Ducati allow them to have a GP24 in their possession to analyse? So I don't know. What happens to these bikes after someone's won a title with them?
So the weird thing is there's no such thing as the championship winning bike. Within about a month's time, there'll probably be about 6 championship winning bikes because there'll be bits of all the bikes that he's used all the season assembled into various show bikes and things like that. Some will go here, some will go there for different trade shows, and one will go to the museum in Bologna and stay there forevermore. Most of those bikes, even the ones that stay in their possession, will go to the racing department first and have all the engine internals stripped out of them and all the electronics stripped out of them. A lot of them will use older fairings, older aero packages, so that you can't copy and paste. And there's no way that Martin will get one immediately, at least. But more immediately, that might not even happen, because there's also the possibility that these bikes go directly to Gresini and VR46, one side of the VR46 garage this weekend. I mean, Franco Morbidelli is most likely going to wheel his own Pramac Ducati GP24 into VR46 and just keep riding it next year, because why wouldn't you? He's staying in the same spec of machine. Let him just stay in the same actual machine. So, maybe Martin's bikes will be different because there's going to be a surplus of GP24s next year. But they won't get them right away. They'll never get something that is a complete motorbike. And some of them might actually just still be in the grid next year. I know this is a really random nugget of information, but Ducati used to build the the two-seater MotoGP bike that was sponsored by Marlboro that they used to give VIPs and special guests and sponsors laps of the circuit during the race weekend. The old one of those was an 800cc Valentino Rossi bike.
Oh wow.
Speaking of Valentino Rossi, I'm sure he's said before that he has like one of his bikes in his bedroom.
Yeah, he has a Yamaha M1 in his bedroom. But then he is also still a Yamaha brand ambassador and therefore probably unlikely to sell that to Aprilia.
Yeah, true.
Unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely.
You never know.
Also, even with Rossi's association Ducati now, if he was to go, do you want to have a look at this Yamaha? They're probably like, nah, you're all right.
Knowing Valentino Rossi, the businessman, he probably still tried to sell to Aprilia as well, though.
Diverting away from off track a little bit, because there's some fairly big pieces of news bubbling around the paddock as well, and one of them involved suggestions that Formula One boss Stefano Domenicali was going to be taking over MotoGP when the Liberty Media acquisition is completed. Now, a bit of digging by both our F1 correspondent Scott Mitchell-Malm and Simon has suggested that's not actually the case, but Simon, it does seem like there's some quite big change coming to Dorna, even if it's not Domenicali.
So the Domenicali things, rumours were fairly quickly shut down whenever we got Scott on the F1 side of things to look into it. A bit of a misunderstanding, it seems. And generally, when something comes from a single journalist and then you don't immediately hear rumours backing it up from others over the course of sort of the following 12 hours, you tend to be a bit sceptical, and that's what happened with this. So I was never too sure. It seems like Domenicali is not coming to MotoGP. But I mean, I don't know when I first ran it by you guys, but I've heard rumours for a while that Carmelo Ezpeleta was potentially on his way out as part of the Liberty takeover, which is, I mean, exactly what they did in F1 to Bernie Eccleston, and would therefore be in no way surprising. It might be a little bit tougher in MotoGP because it's not just Carmelo, it's a whole multiple layers of the Ezpeleta family that need to be talked to. But that bit wouldn't surprise me. I don't know if it's, I don't believe it's going to be Domenicali. Scott convinced me it wasn't going to be Domenicali. And my current rumour that I'm trying to start is that former FOM sporting director and massive motorbike racing fan, Ross Brawn, was here on Sunday, and I think we should make Ross Brawn the new boss. Seems like fun.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that seems fine. Domenicali is a MotoGP fan, isn't he? And he's close with Pramac boss Paolo Campinotti. But yeah, it seems, if anything, he might be doing a bit of advising, which would make sense with Liberty owning both properties, but he's not set to be taking over. Another bit of off-track chat was the announcement of UK broadcaster TNT Sports' new deal. Now, what made this interesting to everyone was that after a long time of MotoGP being not free-to-air in the UK and a massive decline in viewership at the same time, TNT is putting all the sprint races and 2 Grand Prix on its free-to-air channel Quest on Freeview next year, which is basically, as soon as sprints run out, Simon was tweeting they should be free to air. They're a lovely kind of bite-sized way into MotoGP for people. And the UK broadcaster is doing it. So basically, Simon, everyone must do this, surely. It's just logical, isn't it?
Others have already done it. It's been done previously by Sky in Italy. And I think a few of the other broadcasters have experimented with similar. But I went back and looked just so that I could be particularly smug, and I tweeted about this 5 hours after they announced sprint races. And I've kind of made the argument at various points since. I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, look, here's the good thing, right? Everyone in the UK who's listening to our podcast is a massive MotoGP fan because you're listening to our podcast, so we can kind of figure out that you probably are. You've probably got friends who aren't massive MotoGP fans who you'd like to get involved in the sport, and now you can say, hey, look, go watch this for free. It's only 15-20 minutes long. You're going to love it, and hopefully they do. It can only help.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a couple of races a year free on Quest, main races free on Quest as well, including the British Grand Prix. I'm hoping that the ITV4 highlights package that goes out on a Monday night also moves to Quest. and then you can market that whole package of both free and paid content to everyone as a bit of a concerted effort, and hopefully it gets the word out there that you can watch MotoGP in some way, in lots of different ways in the UK, and it turns around a bit of the decline, and more people find out how amazing this all is.
I think as like a free amuse-bouche, it's brilliant because we're trying to get younger people into MotoGP, younger, more diverse people into this championship, right? And if you live at home with your parents and you're 17 years old and you don't have control over what TV packages they pay for, but you can watch it on Quest on a Saturday and still be in the loop, and then spend your money elsewhere. I can't pay for TNT because it's not my decision, but like I can buy a t-shirt. I can invest in this championship in other ways. I can at least watch the Saturday race, even if I can't see the Sunday race. So from an accessibility angle, I think it's great. Just for like younger people who can't afford to pay for the full package. Like if you can watch the sprint on a Saturday and the highlights on a Monday, you're getting still quite a good experience. And then you might go, okay, well, I'll go to the race, sure. Like my dad pays for TNT now, but for about 6 months last year, he was like, and it's too expensive. So there's that as well. Like if people can feel like they can participate a little bit, and also if they can afford it, but they don't want to commit straight away, they can then spend, a few races watching the sprints, getting interested, and then make that decision later on. So I think it's all round a great decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said a few times, I'm so pleased every time someone in the members club asks a question because they haven't followed MotoGP for that long and they want to check out something from 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago. It's great that MotoGP is drawing in new fans. I'm not at all surprised. The on-track product is not what it once was, but it's still really good a lot of the time, and the storylines are fantastic as well. It's great that more people are getting into MotoGP, but there's scope for so many more people to do it still, and making it a bit more accessible, and hopefully really marketing it hard so that these free sprints are a way into more paying for the TV packages, maybe whatever, but just more people at the races in the UK as well. Just it's a really big opportunity if it's handled right. Little diversion before we do our final summing up. Speaking of how the on-track product used to be, you three will definitely be aware of our Bring Back V10's Retro F1 podcast series covering 1989 to 2005 F1, sometimes a bit more recent. And there have been lots of calls over the years for us to do something similar with MotoGP. We're going to put a little toe in that water for the members club next year. As part of Bring Back V10s, and this is the first you three are hearing of this, which is quite amusing. As part of Bring Back V10s, we've been running a series called F1 97 Revisited, where 4 of us go back over the whole 1997 F1 season and do some mini episodes just talking about our impressions of those races, and kind of, it's almost like a watch-along, but with more arguing. We're going to do a MotoGP equivalent in the members club. We'll pop a little bit of in the main feed next year. And we're going to ask you in the Race Members Club on Patreon to vote for which year we do. And the choice, Val is nodding enthusiastically, the choice is going to be 2006 or 2015 for our first series of MotoGP Revisited. Some great faces.
No.
In response to that.
I only started watching MotoGP in 2021, so this is fantastic news.
Oh no. Well, Megan, let me tell you, something happened in 2015.
I've heard about this, but I can't wait. This is great. Whatever happens, I don't know.
No spoiler, absolutely no spoilers, everyone. Val.
Matt, I want to say, this is genuinely the first time hearing of it. I'd like to make this clear. This is not promotion or anything. It's the best goddamn idea I've ever heard. I'm super stoked. It's genuinely made me 30% more excited for next year.
It's going to be fun.
I'm kind of speechless.
I've been part of the 1997 series for in F1 terms for Bring Back V10s, and it's been me, our boss Glenn Freeman, Ed Straw, and Ben Anderson from the F1 lineup, and we were all kind of reliving our teenage fury about various things from 97. And the 2 years we got from MotoGP will be great fun because there's a mix of things we followed when we were young, things we're actually working professionally around motorsport and MotoGP for by that time. So bits of paddock insight mixed with kind of our younger selves and what we thought of it at the time. And it'll be up to all of you in the Race Members Club to decide if we do 2006 or 2015. There'll be a post going up on Patreon shortly with a poll on it, and we'll keep the vote open for, I reckon, until the end of November, and we'll start recording over the winter and start popping the episodes out before pre-season testing. You guys didn't know this was coming. This was an idea that me and our boss Glenn have had, and producer Johnny, who runs the podcasts, sort of knew it's coming because I emailed him on a day off. He hasn't replied, so this might be the first he hears when he edits this episode as well. But
can I just implore people to vote for 2006, because I don't know if I can cope with the 2015 social media hate. I was there the first time round.
Simon, I fear you've just guaranteed 2015 is going to win.
Yeah, I figured 2015 was guaranteed anyway. I'm just trying to make myself feel better.
I've seen bits and bobs of it, but I was not watching as it happened. So this is a good opportunity for me to spend all my evenings watching the 2015 season. So
it's whichever year it is. The Rossi Hayden year 2006 was absolutely epic as well. 2015 with Marquez, Lorenzo, and Rossi having all kinds of antics was a fabulous one as well. They're amazing for storylines. Going back through them, I watched both in full at the time. I was 2006. I wasn't somewhere that was covering MotoGP until the following year. 2015, it was a big thing where I was working, and it was. But I can't remember most of the details. So rewatching it, the races raw will be fun. Just
to make another attempt to steer this. Remember, American listeners, who won 2006?
Hey, no spoilers. Who won 2006?
I didn't say any names.
I didn't realise Colin Edwards had the title.
Colin's got a few titles.
Anyway, on that note, thank you, Simon, Val, Megan, for doing this all year long. It has been great fun. I've got my role at the race covers quite a lot of different tasks day in, day out, but this is my absolute favourite of all the things we do. MotoGP is brilliant. Even when it's not the best it could be, it is still brilliant in terms of storylines, in terms of keeping you on your toes because you don't know which of these people is going to throw it down the road next, even when everything seems serene. Arguing about it with you guys every week is so much fun. The interaction we get from the members club is just an absolute privilege to have landed on this podcast. So thank you for your arguments, interaction. Thank you for your patience all year, listeners. We'll be back in your ears really, really soon, as 2025 is about to start in a couple of days' time at Barcelona with the test.
The Athletic.